The Gilded Age, HBO's latest series. I love it. What do you think about it? I love my period pieces. I really do. It's made by the creator of Downton Abbey. And what I love about this period piece is that it's set in New York, where I was born, right? My birthplace. But it's set in New York in the 1800s. And we rarely get a glimpse of American period pieces that kind of show us the makings of America. Like, I mean, we get stuff in the 1900s, but we barely ever get stuff from the 1800s. And this story is really, I mean, well, the writer is British, and he's really crafted this story in a way that presents, the East Coast, New York City, as, a representation of what things were like in England back in those days. But obviously, there's this whole idea that the British are the originators of class, which is like untrue. As far as Western culture is concerned, the British are the originators of class. We know well, not just the British, but like also the French. You could say the Spanish as well. But when we really dig into history, the Moors are the ones that taught them how to bathe and taught them how to, the Romans taught the British how to build roads. But people just only know about the British history through colonization, and they don't know pre 500 years ago, and don't realize that the British people, in fact, when like the Nordic, I mean, if you just learn British history, you'll just find that they were not the most sophisticated, but they love to present themselves as sophisticated. And I'm not against the UK. I've lived there for a long time. I go, hey, I'm not coming for the British. But what I will say is it was a breath of fresh air to see the American perspective, that this idea of class, was handed down to them by Europeans, not just the British, you could say the French as well, and all of those things. And if you didn't know, America was votes away from speaking German. So had this country not adopted the English language, it probably wouldn't be the commerce center of the world. It probably wouldn't be the superpower that it is now, simply because most trade, the reason why America was able to advance globally is they took advantage of the UK's colonial partnerships, or how the UK colonized the world and took over, many countries around the world. The United States got to use that as a tool to further its globalization. The reason why American media, has done so well is because they are able to export content in English to 54 or more countries, right? And then other countries are dubbed, but most people are expected to speak English. So it's like the British sort of, did the job of colonizing the world and spreading the English language around the world. And then the Americans in probably after the 1900s sort of like expanded that reach and was able to dominate, becoming a superpower. But English was definitely a tool that helped it get there. And I really genuinely do not believe that America would be the country that it is today if it was a German-speaking country. Because how many countries were colonized by the Germans? Not too many. At least not even close to how many were colonized by the British. But I digress. I love to tell a little bit of history. But we're telling this story about the Gilded Age, and it's set in New York City in the 1800s, and it's based on tribalism, it's based on classism, it's based on how would you say it, traditionalism in a way, right? Because this whole idea of tribalism is that the premise of the show is New York is a set of villages, right? And you don't allow people that are not from your caste. And there's this like wave of newcomers that came into New York City. They came into after the revolution, and the old New Yorkers did not sort of respect them, and they looked down on them. And we see this family who are very, very wealthy. So the Russell family, they move into, the Upper East Side. And the funny thing is, like, The Upper East Side is the most elite place in New York City, and it was back in the 1800s. And we can learn a little bit about the roots of New York City, because even today in New York, people, especially people from the Upper East Side, and of the wealthier end of the spectrum, because I went to one of these like New York City prep schools on the Upper West Side, which is like pretty equal. My school was on the Upper West Side, but all the students lived on the Upper East Side. But between the East Side and the West Side, at least in modern culture, that's still where the elite New Yorkers live, but they're predominantly in the Upper East Side, and these are like traditional New Yorkers, right? And so there's this snobbiness for anybody, because at the end of the day, the way the world is now with New York and the way that it's developed, as long as you live in Manhattan, you're good. And people that live in Brooklyn, there's actually a term for them called bridge and tunnel. And because Brooklyn, or anywhere that's outside of Manhattan, all the tri-state area, because New Jersey, Brooklyn, Long Island, everyone that has to take a bridge or tunnel or a bus or whatever to get into Manhattan, New Yorkers look down on them, and they're snobbish towards them. And it was so funny, because I understand, watching this show set in the 1800s, I understand where that comes from, where that attitude comes from, and it comes from tribalism, right? And when you think about the show, like the fact that in the 1800s, you literally had to take a ferry to travel from Brooklyn, right? And Brooklyn, I believe, was where a lot of the freed black slaves resided in Brooklyn and Harlem. But yes, you could see where that snobbishness comes from, because in this show, it's based in the 1800s. And this is, at this point, if you didn't live in the Upper East Side, you were looked down on. So if you lived on 30th Street, because the Russells, they come from their apartment or their home. It's not an apartment, sorry. They live in these vast mansions, and I'll get to that in a bit. They come from their mansions on 30th Street, which is, I believe, where they came from was Hell's Kitchen today. But they come from there and they move to 60th Street, like 5th Ave, which is like right now today, that's probably the best location, right? And they're snobbed by everyone in that quote unquote village, right? They're snobbed. You're not worthy. And so Mrs. Russell does everything in her power to sort of fit into the community, right? They're very, very wealthy. And it shows that money can't buy you access, especially when it comes to tribalism, right? And it's unclear whether they're new money, but they do have a very new money mentality or behavior, especially based on, but that just might be their Americanness. And they might actually just come from money, because Mr. Russell, he's in the railroad industry. So there's a lot of money in the railroad industry. I mean, that's the jumping start for communication, right? And connecting people, right? The railroad. So he's in the road business, and it seems like he has an empire, and he's very, very wealthy. But he's still, and so everyone cannot deny how powerful he is as an individual, but he's not good enough for the Upper East Side. And it just shows us how they're sort of mistreated and snobbed. She throws a ball and nobody wants to go. She offers for them to use her ballroom, and they don't want to use it. So like they're snobbing her. And it's just an interesting thing to see how you can't buy access, especially to old money. And really, in this case, like I said, I'm not sure whether they're new money or old money, but I can definitely guarantee that they are old. They're new New York. They're the revolution. After the revolution, they're a different New York than the old New York. And the old New Yorkers are very snobbish towards them. So that's the premise of the show. It's definitely a must watch, in my opinion. Very rich history attached to it. Really interesting character development. I mean, this is HBO. They do have diversity in the show. They have black characters. But again, for me, the thing that annoys me about watching these period pieces and their placement of black characters is the toxic racism that we have to watch, because that was part of the era. But it's really not refreshing to watch that. I do enjoy how Bridgerton sort of ignored, because it was a fantasy story, so they ignored the whole race thing, which made that more fun to watch. But watching the racism thing, I mean, it's just like, what do they call it again? Trauma porn, right? We're tired of these like racist movies that give, white people another excuse to shame black people on television. We're tired of it. And so, but either way, like, I do like that they diversified the cast and they do have a black character, or black characters, plural. But either way, the show is, I think it's strong. I think it's gonna, look, it has Cynthia Nixon, who's, in Sex and the City. It has some great characters. It has a great premise. And as a New York City native, I am just excited to see this and see how the show unfolds. Don't want to give any spoilers, but I do want to say that it marks a new. I think HBO is really shaping itself to be a real contender in the streaming marketplace. I think when you think about what's on Netflix is saturated. It's just hard to even select what you want to watch. I think of Showtime, and it has quality shows. I think of Hulu, but I think that when you go to HBO, every single piece of content that you're watching is pretty much guaranteed to be high quality and really strong, have strong storytelling, character development, and all of that. And I think that component of HBO is what is pushing, what sets them apart from other streamers. We have Euphoria, Sex and the City just ended, unfortunately. They have so many other shows, and we know that the Game of Thrones prequel is coming soon. I know they had, we're not sure what dates that's coming yet, but it's coming and we're excited about it. But I think they're just trying to build up their audience to ensure that, look, we have something to watch every day of the week. And also to ensure that we're ready for when, this show comes, because unfortunately, if they don't have a lineup to guarantee us to stay, then we're not going to stay. But they're really making some groundbreaking shows. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. Are you excited to watch The Gilded Age? Have you already started watching it? What are your thoughts on the whole concept, the premise, and the character development and the storytelling? What are your thoughts on, some of the scenes? I don't want to give any spoilers, but let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. My name is Kenim, and see you next time. Peace.